Chapter 13, Part 1 of How I Found Livingstone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Anton Epp. How I Found Livingstone. Travels, Adventures, and Discoveries in Central Africa, including 4 months' residence with Dr. Livingstone, by Sir Henry M. Stanley. Chapter 13, Part 1. Our cruise on the Lake Tanganyika, exploration of the north end of the lake, the Rusizi is discovered to enter into the lake, return to Ujiji. Quote, I distinctly deny that any misleading by my instructions from the Royal Geographical Society as to the position of the White Nile made me unconscious of the vast importance of ascertaining the direction of the Rusizi River. The fact is, we did our best to reach it and we failed. End quote. Burton's Zanzibar. Quote, the universal testimony of the natives to the Rusizi River being an influent is the most conclusive argument that it does run out of the lake. End quote. Speka. Quote, I therefore claim for the Lake Tanganyika the honor of being the southernmost reservoir of the Nile, until some more positive evidence, by actual observation, shall otherwise determine it. End quote. Findlay, R.G.S. Had Livingstone and myself, after making up our minds to visit the northern head of the Lake Tanganyika, been compelled by the absurd demands or fears of a crew of Wajiji to return to Unyanyembe without having resolved the problem of the Rusizi River, we had surely deserved to be greeted by everybody at home with a universal giggling and cackling. But Captain Burton's failure to settle it by engaging Wajiji, and that ridiculous savage chief, Kenena, had warned us of the negative assistance we could expect from such people for the solution of a geographical problem. We had good enough sailors with us, who were entirely under our commands. Could we but procure the loan of a canoe, we thought all might be well. Upon application to Said bin Majid, he at once generously permitted us to use his canoe for any service for which we might require it. After engaging 2 Wajiji guides at 2 doti each, we prepared to sail from the port of Ujiji in about a week or so after my entrance into Ujiji. I have already stated how it was that the Doctor and I undertook the exploration of the northern half of the Tanganyika and the river Rusizi, about which so much had been said and written. Before embarking on this enterprise, Dr. Livingstone had not definitely made up his mind which course he should take, as his position was truly deplorable. His servants consisted of Susi, Chumha, Hamyoda, Gardner, and Halama, the female cook and wife of Hamoida. To these was added Kaif Halek, the man whom I compelled to follow me from Unyanyembe to deliver the Livingstone letters to his master. Whither could Dr. Livingstone march with these few men and the few tablecloths and beads that remained to him from the store squandered by the imbecile sheriff? This was a puzzling question. Had Dr. Livingstone been in good health, his usual hardihood and indomitable spirit had answered it in a summary way. He might have borrowed some cloth from Said bin Majid at an exorbitant price, sufficient to bring him to Unyanyembe and the sea coast. But how long would he have been compelled to sit down at Ujiji, waiting and waiting for the goods that were said to be at Unyanyembe, a prey to high expectations, hoping day after day that the war would end, hoping week after week to hear that his goods were coming? Who knows how long his weak health had borne up against the several disappointments to which he would be subjected. Though it was with all due deference to Dr. Livingstone's vast experience as a traveller, I made bold to suggest the following courses to him, either of which he could adopt. First, to go home, and take the rest he so well deserved, and, as he appeared then, to be so much in need of. Second, to proceed to Unyanyembe, receive his goods, and enlist pagazis sufficient to enable him to travel anywhere, either to Manyema or Rua, and settle the Nile problem, which he said he was in a fair way of doing. Third, to proceed to Unyanyembe, receive his caravan, enlist men, and try to join Sir Samuel Baker, either by going to Maunza and sailing through Ukarawi, or Victoria Nyanza in my boats, which I should put up to Matisa's place at Uganda, thus passing by Mirambo and Suraru of Usui, who would rob him if he took the usual caravan road to Uganda, thence from Matisa to Kamrasi, king of Uyoro, where he would of course hear of the great white man who was said to be with a large force of men of Gondokoro. Fourth, to proceed to Unyanyembe, receive his caravan, enlist men, and return to Ujiji, and back to Manyuma by way of Uguha. Fifth, to proceed by way of the Rusizi through Ruanda, and so on to Itara, Unyoro, and Baker. For either course, whichever he thought most expedient, I and my men would assist him as escort and carriers to the best of our ability. If he should elect to go home, I informed him that I should be proud to escort him, and consider myself subject to his commands, travelling only when he desired, and camping only when he gave the word. Sixth, the last course which I suggested to him was to permit me to escort him to Unyanyembe. There he could receive his own goods, and where I could deliver up to him a large supply of first-class cloth and beads, guns and ammunition, cooking utensils, clothing, boats, tents, etc., and where he could rest in a comfortable house while I would hurry down to the coast, organize a new expedition composed of 50 or 60 faithful men, well armed, by whom I could send an additional supply of needful luxuries in the shape of creature comforts. After long consideration, he resolved to adopt the last course, as it appeared to him to be the most feasible one, and the best, though he did not hesitate to comment upon the unaccountable apathy of his agent at Zanzibar, which had caused him so much trouble and vexation, and weary marching of hundreds of miles. Our ship, though nothing more than a cranky canoe hollowed out of a noble umvuli tree of Ngoma, was an African Argo bound on a nobler enterprise than its famous Grecian prototype. We were bound upon no mercenary errand, after no golden fleece, but perhaps to discover a highway for commerce which should bring the ships of the Nile up to Ujiji, Usowa, and the far Marungu. We did not know what we might discover on our voyage to the northern head of the Tanganyika. We supposed that we should find the Rusizi to be an effluent of the Tanganyika, flowing down to the Albert or the Victoria Nyanza. We were told by natives and Arabs that the Rusizi ran out of the lake. Said bin Majid had stated that his canoe would carry 25 men and 3,500 pounds of ivory. Acting upon this information, we embarked 25 men, several of whom had stored away bags of salt for the purposes of trade with the natives; but upon pushing off from the shore near Ujiji, we discovered that the boat was too heavily laden, and was down to the gunwale. Returning inshore, we disembarked 6 men and unloaded the bags of salt, which left us with 16 rowers, Salim, Ferajij, the cook, and the 2 Wajiji guides. Having thus properly trimmed our boat, we again pushed off, and steered her head for Bangwe Island, which was distant 4 or 5 miles from the Bunder of Ujiji. While passing this island, the guides informed us that the Arabs and Wajiji took shelter on it during an incursion of the Watuta, which took place some years ago, when they came and invaded Ujiji, and massacred several of the inhabitants. Those who took refuge on the island were the only persons who escaped the fire and sword with which the Watuta had visited Ujiji. After passing the island and following the various bends and indentations of the shore, we came in sight of the magnificent bay of Kigoma, which strikes one at once as being an excellent harbour from the variable winds which blow over the Tanganyika. About 10 a.m. we drew in towards the village of Kigoma, as the east wind was then rising, and threatened to drive us to sea. With those travelling parties who were not in much hurry, Kigoma is always the first port for canoes bound north from Ujiji. The next morning at dawn we struck tent, stowed baggage, cooked and drank coffee, and set off northward again. The lake was calm. Its waters, of a dark green colour, reflected the serene blue sky above. The hippopotami came up to breathe in alarmingly close proximity to our canoe, and then plunged their heads again, as if they were playing hide and seek with us. Arriving opposite the high wooded hills of Bemba, and being a mile from shore, we thought it a good opportunity to sound the depth of the water, whose colour seemed to indicate great depth. We found 35 fathoms at this place. Our canoeing of this day was made close inshore, with a range of hills, beautifully wooded and clothed with green grass, sloping abruptly, almost precipitously, into the depths of the fresh water sea, towering immediately above us, and as we rounded the several capes or points, roused high expectation of some new wonder, or some exquisite picture being revealed as the deep folds disclosed themselves to us. Nor were we disappointed. The wooded hills, with a wealth of boscage of beautiful trees, many of which were in bloom and crowned with floral glory, exhaling an